President Ebrahim Raisi, known for enforcing brutal crackdowns on political opposition and seen as a potential successor to the supreme leader, has died in a helicopter crash landing in the country's north, state media reported Monday. He was 63 years old. Raisi, a conservative hardline cleric, took office in August 2021 after several popular candidates were disqualified from the election, which saw historically low turnout. He wore a black turban, symbolic of those who are descendants of the Prophet Muhammad. His tenure saw a crackdown on mass protests after 22-year-old Mahsa Amini was killed. The enforcement of a strict women's dress code, increased enrichment of uranium after the U.S. withdrew from a landmark nuclear deal, and increased military tensions with Israel in the West as the regime supported Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthi rebels in Yemen, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Raisi was sometimes notably referred to as the Butcher of Tehran, as activists have accused him of being one of the 4 judges who oversaw the mass execution of thousands of political prisoners in 1988 after the Iran-Iraq War. Iran has never acknowledged what has been described as a massacre of an estimated 2,800 to 5,000 people, according to Human Rights Watch, as Deputy Prosecutor General of Tehran, the U.S. Treasury Department said in a 2019 sanctions announcement. Raisi participated in a so-called death commission that ordered the extrajudicial executions of thousands of political prisoners in 1988. In 2021, when Raisi was asked about his alleged involvement in the 1988 mass executions during his first news conference as president-elect, he described himself as a defender of human rights. State media reported early Monday that rescuers found no sign of life in the wreckage of the helicopter that made a crash landing Sunday. The news comes after search and rescue teams were deployed to the scene of the crash. Took hours to reach the crash site, delayed by heavy fog and bad weather. 2 helicopters traveling with Raisi made their destination unharmed. Though state news aired prayers for Raisi and others following the crash, the president is despised by many Iranians in the country and around the world for the government's brutal crackdown on the country's 2022 women-led protests and Iran's dire economic situation. In 2017, he lost the presidential election to Hassan Rouhani, who was elected to a second term by a wide margin. Rouhani, who had run on a promise to reduce Iran's diplomatic and economic isolation, was banned earlier this year by Iran for running for the Assembly of Experts, which appoints and can dismiss the supreme leader, Reuters reported. In 2021, Amnesty International's Secretary General Agnes Callamard urged an investigation against Raisi for his alleged crimes against humanity, while he was head of the Iranian judiciary. Under Raisi's watch, Callamard said, Iranian authorities killed hundreds of people with impunity, subjecting thousands of protesters to mass arrests and at least hundreds to enforced disappearance, and torture and other ill treatment during and in the aftermath of the nationwide protests. Ebrahim Raisi's rise to the presidency follows an electoral process that was conducted in a highly repressive environment and barred women, members of religious minorities and candidates with opposing views from running for office, Callamard said. In 2022, the United Nations Human Rights Office opened an investigation into the violent suppression of protesters who took to the streets following Amini's killing. She died after being detained by morality police for allegedly not wearing her hijab properly and failing to adhere to the dress code. The United Nations said in March that a fact-finding mission found Iran responsible for the physical violence that killed Amini, despite Iranian officials saying otherwise. Raisi told NBC News' Lester Holt last year that Amini's death was an incident, alleging that similar incidents frequently occur in Western states. He claimed that Iran's leadership tolerated the protests, despite widespread reports of violent suppression against demonstrators. You should be assured that the Islamic Republic of Iran has always been ready to listen to the words of protesters. On any issue, we are all ears, he said through a government translator. Raisi also claimed that there was still freedom of speech in Iran and denied allegations by human rights advocates that the country enforced an internet blackout following the protests. The Iranian regime is also accused of blocking social media apps, arresting journalists and punishing any public criticism of the government following Amini's death. He alleged that these allegations were an attempt by Western states to destabilize Iran internally. UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk said in January 2023 that Iran's government was weaponizing the criminal proceedings and death penalty laws to stamp out dissent. The weaponization of criminal procedures to punish people for exercising their basic rights, such as those participating in or organizing demonstrations, amounts to state-sanctioned killing, Turk said. Despite concerns over Iran's attacks on human rights, Raisi was permitted to address the UN General Assembly last year, where he criticized Western states for meddling in Middle Eastern affairs. An independent and robust neighborhood presents an opportunity for the entire region, he said, referring to potential regional partnerships. We will welcome any extended hand quite warmly.
Has come out where the ministers have started sharing condolences messages for the death of Mr. President Ebrahim Raisi, as well as the foreign minister of Iran who was there on that helicopter. And as far as the immediate concerns which you're asking for, I would just like to remind that Iran just held the parliamentary elections and participation rate was at a record low, 41% nationally, but only around 7% in Tehran. Now, since the death of Mr. Ebrahim Raisi in this helicopter crash, the first Vice President, Mr. Mokhbar, will take the charge, and in 16 days the new elections will have to be called in. So that is the domestic politics of Iran. As far as the geopolitical situation is concerned, the Iran's policies with other countries will continue to remain the same, with powers staying with Mr. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, as well as the IRGC, which is the Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran. We know that how Iran was being blamed for escalating the situation with Israel. Iran, just last month we saw the situation escalating between the two countries. Israel has been blaming Iran for the Gaza war, for arming Hamas as well as Hezbollah in Lebanon, as well as Houthis in Yemen. So those policies will continue to remain unchanged as far as the geopolitical situation after the death of Iranian president is concerned. And as far as India is concerned, we just saw that 10 days ago the Chabahar port deal was signed between India and Iran, and even US was not very pleasant about it. US has raised its objection about it, but Indian Foreign Minister Mr. Jaishankar had said that US should not take a very narrow view of the same Chabahar port for which it had given an exemption.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment and share.